Hey everyone, this is Christina here. I just decided to kind of make this video about how I became a international wildlife biologist, kind of where my story has taken me, how everything kind of played out, and how I have my job today. So if you guys are interested, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see what kind of videos I put out. I'm not really sure what I'm doing at this point, but that's okay. I'm actually from California. I didn't always want to be a wildlife biologist. That was pretty recent in life that I decided to do that, which is a little bit rare for this career. A lot of people you see do want to get in, like from the age of 4 years old. They always dreamed about being, a cheetah biologist or something really specific. I was a little bit different. My father took me backpacking all the time, pretty much when I was a kid. I was always out. I originally kind of flip-flopped between all different jobs I wanted to do, but when I became kind of serious about applying for college, out of high school, I wanted to be a doctor. So when I was in university, I kind of came in with this microbiology major, but when I actually started doing the coursework, I found that the people were quite competitive. I didn't really like how it felt to be around a big group of med students, and I realized that wasn't really like the culture that I wanted to work in for the rest of my life. I was working retail, fast food, and I just didn't have the time for like a med school track. Like I wasn't getting good grades. I mean, they were okay, but like nothing that would get me into med school. So I decided to kind of take this ecology class that I had to take I had to take the ecology class to even transfer to the school I wanted to transfer to. So I started out in community college, and with kind of just the idea I want to transfer to a 4-year school. I had a professor who was so, like, the way that he talked just made the information so much more interesting. It has like the science elements that I liked from microbiology, but like the type of people that are in ecology was much more my vibe, like my energy. A lot of people really into like backpacking, climbing, the outdoors, environmentalism, and that was like, okay, like this is where I should be. Like it really, really felt right as soon as I started getting into those classes. I went to UCSD the following year after community college. I was working pretty much full time through my first few years of community college to save money to go on this backpacking trip. And I didn't want to just, screw around. Like I wanted to go do something like interesting. I found this place called Comunidad Intawariasi. They are located in Bolivia, and they're a non-profit. They rescue cougars, jaguars, every kind of like big cat really. When they can rehabilitate and re-release them, like with monkeys, they do. So we would take care of those. So it was like daily enrichment. We got to feed them. We got to play with them. We got to walk them through the jungle. They had these long rope systems so that they were able to kind of get exposed to their natural environment and not just stuck in a cage for the rest of their life. I was so lucky to be able to do that, and I finally was able to experience what life at a remote field station was like, which was, quite eye-opening, where there's no access to hot water. There's monkeys and rats getting into our field station. All sorts of crazy stuff that really prepared me for later on in life. I kind of always had this extreme example of the Amazon with mosquitoes all over me to compare to. Our program, we had to do an internship. There was a lot of unpaid ones, which would have been fine, but I was supporting myself. I had to work. I think I was working at Chipotle at the time, and so I was I needed to get a paid internship. Otherwise I can't do this. I can't afford to just take an unpaid internship, and unpaid internships are so common in wildlife biology. Not only unpaid internships, but you pay to work for them, and so it's always dodging these pay to work type things. So when I had my interview for my first internship as a government organization, and I think the only experience I had in the time was that retail experience on my resume. And then I had that trip to Bolivia that I did. It was only a few months, but I put that on my resume to show hey, I have been out in the field. I also put some of my school information. I put my lab, so I had to do an ecology lab in school, so I put that on my resume. So I definitely would recommend putting all experience on your resume. if you are applying to grad school, you need to network with professors. You need to be volunteering in a lab or working in a lab if you can find a paid position. The world of wildlife biology is really, really small. So the lab mates that you had in school, they actually can end up being job referrals later on down the road. One of the girls that was in my lab actually ended up working at the exact same remote field station in Bolivia as I did. So when I worked at this government organization, that really opened all the doors for me. I ended up meeting so many different people and getting so much good resume advice. Get exposed to all different types of work. So if you're in an internship, you want to be exposed to plants, vegetation type work. You want to do aquatics, fisheries, like anything that anyone says, hey, can you help me out with this? Do it, because that could get you a job. I have marketed myself as a vegetation biologist, a rare plants biologist, a aquatic biologist, a fisheries biologist, water quality monitoring. Like, you got to do what you got to do sometimes, and when times are good, then that's when you really push into those wildlife positions. I told everyone that I was an intern and that I was looking for a job after graduation, and I really put myself into a project that was quite high profile for my undergraduate thesis. And that undergraduate thesis that I did, if your school doesn't require you to do it, at least try to get something maybe out of one of your labs, like some sort of like end of year paper that shows that you know how to write, you know how to do research. When I was in my first few job interviews for wildlife biology, I'd be like, I would really sell myself and like, I know how to write, because there's a lot of field biologists that cannot write a paper, and it's so vitally important for bosses that you can write. Like, it really is gonna put you so much higher up from everyone else. But you kind of need an example of that. Like, anyone can say, oh yeah, I can write for sure, but you want the actual like paper. So I had like my senior thesis, and I would give it to them. Like, I printed it out, I laminated it, like just the front cover, and I would give it to people I was interviewing with, and I always got really good feedback from that. So they always seemed to think that was cool, and my research was interesting, it was relevant to what I was doing. So that research project was really, really helpful in getting me a job later on down the line. So I was all kind of set to work in San Diego when I graduated. That made the most sense, that was where my internship was. I really, really wanted to travel. I wanted to see some different type of wildlife than I was seeing before. And I'd seen some documentary, and they had a wildlife movement video that we watched in one of my classes. So it was how wildlife use these wildlife overpasses on Highway 1 through Banff National Park, and just like, I thought this was the coolest thing, because that's basically what I was studying, was wildlife movement. So I ended up randomly applying to present my paper I had done on the cougar and bobcat research. I had applied to present that in Alberta. So like, I had never been to Alberta. I had no connections in Alberta, but I knew I wanted to work in the mountains. So I found the Wildlife Society had a conference up in this place, Jasper, Alberta, up here. So I ended up submitting my paper as to be a presenter there. And then they actually ended up saying yes. Like, they thought it was pretty relevant for people in Alberta to hear the same kind of like research that I was doing. And it turns out there was actually a lot of other students there presenting their research. So I think they might have said yes to everyone. But I actually was like, okay, perfect like networking opportunity. So I flew myself up to Jasper here, and I presented my paper on California wildlife at a Canadian wildlife conference. And at that time, I was thinking the best way to get to Canada would be a master's degree. So I really just wanted to get the visa. And so I ended up applying to University of Alberta and University of Calgary, and both of them rejected me because I wasn't a Canadian. And that was really disappointing, but I also understood it, because a lot of their grants require that you are Canadian to do it. Actually, I was like, you know what, like, I'm really set on going anyway. I'm going to come on a working holiday visa. If anyone wants to come to Canada as an American, this is a really, really good opportunity for a post-grad person to do it. So after you graduate from a 4-year university in the United States, you're actually eligible to come to Canada for 1 year to work on, like, you can work anywhere you want, but it's only for 1 year. And I think pretty much everyone who graduates from a 4-year university who's an American citizen is eligible for that. And like maybe I'll do another video on how to actually apply and, you know, get your working holiday and what some of the pros and cons are. But anyway, I came to Canada on one of those, and so the problem with coming on a working holiday is a lot of people are really, really hesitant to hire you because, you know, you can only work for 1 year. And but little do a lot of people know, there's, for now at least, there's this NAFTA visa. It's called like TN visa when Canadians are coming to the US, but I've always heard it be called like NAFTA, NAFTA visa. And with that, biologist is on the list of professions that are eligible to get a, I think it's 3 or 4 year long visa if you have a written job offer for a biology position as a biologist or a technical writer. I ended up using the technical writer category for my first job, but one of those, like if you fall in one of those, you get a really easy to get visa. So when I came to Canada for the first time, I like obviously could not find a position right away. So I started out working at a retail store that sold like backpacking gear, and I worked there for 6 months, and I was just applying to everything I could find. I was applying to 100, I think I must have applied to like 500 positions before I got my first job. So I was applying for everything too. Like I was applying for like drilling waste to, you know, phase 1 site assessments, to remediation, to vegetation, like anything I had even done once for 1 day, I was applying to a position like that. One of my big tips is to do a LinkedIn profile. Like sign up for LinkedIn, put a nice photo of yourself in, a headshot, and then fill out all of your experience. And there's even opportunities to like add pictures, to add like research reports, to add all the classes that you took in university. Like all of that information is so useful for putting into your LinkedIn profile. And then add all of your old coworkers. So if you can go in and you can find some old coworkers, there's a lot of professors to kind of like build up your network that way. And then you can even like start reaching out to some people who have like maybe one connection with, or you just are really interested in their job. So like you can search like wildlife biologist in your city and LinkedIn just as like a search term, like wildlife biologist San Diego. And then you can see all the people who are working as wildlife biologists in the city that you live in. And then one trick is you can actually scroll down, like look through their resume if it's public, and you can see where they worked. So you can see maybe you worked at the same place, or maybe you guys went to the same school, and then you can reach out and send a message. Or if you don't want to send a message, you can just look at what their background looked like and the type of companies they worked for. So then that kind of brings me to my other tip, is to keep a running list of companies in your area that hire wildlife biologists or environmental biologists. So, you know, when you do that search on LinkedIn for the names of the people working in your field, in your city, you can see where all the places that they worked, and then just like write them down. You can Google search too, like environmental consulting, your city, environmental consulting, anywhere you want to work, and use that as a search term and see what companies come up. Then you have your big long list of places to apply to, really. So from there you can also add like to your list if you know anyone from that organization. So you can put like Cal Fire and then colon, and maybe you went to school with a guy who's now working there as an intern. And so then you can kind of get this long list of resources, and from there you can pick which ones you're going to apply to. Like say there's a big corporation you want to work for in Hawaii, and you live in Colorado. You can get a job at the Colorado location of the company you want to work for, and then there is those opportunities for transfer. So that's one of the big pluses, the big companies, is that you can always transfer to different locations if there's an opportunity. And so just because you get a job in one place, that doesn't mean that that's the end of your journey with that company. And if you want to move countries, you're just screwed. Like a lot of these big international companies really move people around. So after 6 months of working for this retail organization, I finally got a call. I got a few interviews that they didn't really go anywhere. Like they would be interested in my resume, but as soon as I said I wasn't a Canadian, they pretty much were like, all right, you know, we'll call you when we call you, right? So I finally got a call back from one company, and they actually had seen me on LinkedIn. So I still credit LinkedIn for getting that job, because a lot of LinkedIn's job postings, they have the little picture of the recruiter or a name for the recruiter, and then you can actually go and like click on the recruiter and add them, and then send them like a direct message that says, hey, like I saw you're advertising for a junior wildlife biologist position, like and then you can send your resume, or you can try to get a follow-up conversation with that person. And I know some recruiters like it when you do that and some don't, but it's something that I tried and it did work for me for my first job. So this recruiter emails me back, and it's for a administrative position. But it was still environmental, but really it was very, very entry level. But I know that at that company they also hired wildlife biologists. So I was really interested in just like getting my foot in the door at that company. So it really had nothing to do with wildlife biology, but it was something, and I was pretty desperate for work at the time. So, but it did let me learn all the beginning stages of things I needed to do, how things worked in Canada, how I was exposed to all the different types of projects that environmental consultants worked on. After about 9 months or so at that company, here in Alberta, we hit a big downturn. So pretty much oil crashed. And I was working for a company that pretty much only consulted for oil, and everyone was getting laid off at my company. And I was like, oh no, this is I finally got my first job in environmental consulting, and now I'm gonna get laid off because we had all this downtime where we had no work to do. So I ended up talking with the wildlife biologist that I worked for and say hey, I kind of want to help you guys out in the field. And I brought up the idea to my boss of why don't we go out and do training sessions around town. So these biologists ended up taking me just on work hours around town to go learn all my different birds, to learn pretty much everything I needed to know about Alberta at a degree, and 1.5 years of experience as an administrator. And I was laid off, and every other wildlife biologist that had 10 years of experience was also out of work. So now I was competing with pretty much everyone else in all of Alberta that was studying wildlife biology or was working as a wildlife biologist. So I was well, I'm pretty much screwed. But after I got laid off, this NAFTA visa is tied to my employer. So now I had no job. The economy was horrible. No one was getting hired, and I had no visa. So I was at the bottom of the barrel of candidates. No one wants to sponsor a visa when there's Canadians with 20 years of experience who's also fighting for that work. I was laid off for about a year. I used that time to volunteer at a sanctuary, an animal sanctuary here in town. We had wolf dogs, we had coyotes, and goats and everything. And I also decided to backpack the section of the Pacific Crest Trail with my friend, and we had an awesome experience then. And then I kind of came back and I was okay, I need a job. My boyfriend and I had lived together for 1 year. So if you live together for 1 year in Canada, you're considered common law. So when you're a common law spouse, you can sponsor your spouse for a permanent resident visa. So we did that, a permanent residency. I will not need any more visas ever again. I am now a permanent resident of Canada kind of thing. So I ended up kind of hitting LinkedIn hard and messaging people and posting articles and just kind of getting my name out there. I would even go to the climbing gym and offer to belay people, so that I could talk to them and be hey, so what do you do for work? And I actually ended up meeting a lot of really good connections, because it turns out the people who like outdoor activities like climbing also tend to be geologists, environmental biologists, scientists. So I ended up meeting so many people I still work with all the time, just while climbing. So I ended up getting a message on LinkedIn that was we might need some biologists to help us out this winter. Are you interested? So I was yeah, I was so desperate. So I ended up meeting this guy, and at the office, it was a really, really small consulting company, 10 people. And he just hired me on the spot, and turns out it was a contractor position. So that meant I had to provide all my own supplies. So there was kind of a big upfront money cost for all of that. And I was pretty much on pipelines construction, which is really, really, really tough work. I had never done anything like it. I had worked in the field before, but I was sent up north to pretty much supervise an entire pipeline construction for the environmental side of it. And I had never even seen a pipeline get built. I had no idea, absolutely no idea what I was doing. But, this guy I met on LinkedIn, who is now my boss, had faith in me, and I was like, you know what, like, I have nothing else to do. So I ended up pretty much within about a week driving up to northern Canada to work on this pipeline. And I'll do another video about some of my craziest stories from working up north on these pipelines for this job, because it was absolutely insane. Like, I was screamed at, I was yelled at, everything was thrown at me. I learned so fast when you're really pushed into something, and I also learned that that's not the type of work I wanted to do. I don't want to be gone for 4 months at a time in a mud pit in the Northwest Territories. I was like, you know what, like, I have a pretty sweet job title, at least this job. Like, my job title was environmental scientist, finally. So I wanted to use that job title to get me into the job that I really, really wanted to do. So what I decided was, like, okay, at my job now, like, I'm making good money, but I'm only gonna apply for jobs that sound like really, really cool. Like, that would be worth leaving my current job. So I ended up kind of running across a job posting for a wildlife biologist position. I applied, and I actually honestly forgot that I had applied until I got a phone call like 4 weeks later from some like overseas office, and a guy with an accent was like asking, oh, if I can go in for an interview like next week. So I was like, oh my god, like, I honestly forgot. I'm thinking like I forgot I even applied there. It was a wildlife biology position, but the thing is like, I wasn't going to leave my job I had now for a seasonal position. And with wildlife biology, like, seasonal positions are so common. And so I did not want to leave my job just for something I knew I was going to get laid off again in a few months. And as I went into this interview, and I was like, you know what, like, I don't have anything to lose. I'm going to just go in and ask for exactly what I wanted. So I went into this job and I said, you know what, like, I honestly can't, like, I can't have a seasonal position. Like, I need a permanent position. But I was like, you know what, like, I don't have anything else to lose. Like, I'm just going to try it. And I actually ended up getting an offer. So I quit my other job that I was working at for the pipelines, and I started at the company I work for now. The job that I have now, I'm doing amphibian surveys, I'm doing nest sweeps, so I find if there's any nests on the area that's going to be developed to make sure that there's no mortality related to birds for that. We do bat surveys to make sure no bats are impacted by the construction of these new developments. Caribou type work, same thing, to see how they're impacted by disturbances in their habitat, habitat assessments, assessing the quality of the habitat. I travel about 75% of the time in summer, and then about 20% of the time in winter. So our work is very seasonal. So we start around April for the season, and we're working all the way until about September. And then a really, really slow winter, and a lot of people honestly take sometimes months off just to travel. There's a lot of opportunities for movement, so I end up traveling about, like, I'm on a plane once a week. Not only do I travel all during the summer for work, but I usually, when I have the winters off, I do a lot of personal travel, so I get a few months off a year, and I use that time to travel and see places of the world that I want to see, and see some cool animals on my own time as well too. Another tip I have is, don't be afraid to job hop. Right after you graduate, you're very unlikely going to get like junior wildlife biologist right away. Like, sometimes it's starting from the bottom. Like, a junior wildlife position often requires 4 years of experience for an entry-level wildlife position. So coming out of university, like, you're probably not going to qualify for that unless you did a million internships and had a really good in. But as long as, like, you're keeping your eye out for opportunities and you're using each position you're in to, like, bring you a little bit closer to that final wildlife biologist position that you want to have, that's the key. Even if you're happy in your position now and you're like, okay, well, like, I only have 1 year of experience, so it makes sense I'm an administrator, like, you still want to be looking out for better positions that you can apply to. Another tip I have is, don't get focused on a specific species that you want to work for. So I know a lot of people are like, I want to be a polar bear biologist, and that's like my dream job. Like, that's awesome, but there's probably only like 5 polar bear biologists in like one province. Start, looking for those opportunities with that specific species within the context of a job as a general wildlife biologist that you already might have. For people who want to do marine biology, my tip is to get your major in something a little bit more general, like ecology, your electives, you can pick marine biology classes, and the lab that you work with, you can work with marine biology lab, and that's going to make you a lot more multidisciplinary. Let's see, that's all I can think of. That's the story of how I got my job now. It's not straightforward. Like, it's not a ladder that you graduate and then you get a wildlife biology job. Like, a lot of times it's just like chaos. It wasn't perfect for me, and I'm still, trying to transition within the role I'm in now to find what kind of projects I like working on the most. But I'm very happy to be working as a wildlife biologist, and I hope that no one gives up hope if that is your dream job, because it's definitely achievable. If you are a aspiring wildlife biologist, don't get discouraged. Everyone's path is so different, and you will get there eventually if you just keep networking and pursuing the work you want to do. So if you liked my video and you want to see more like this, go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and then let me know in the comments section like what other type of wildlife biology or career type videos you want to see, because I have a lot of experience in a lot of different types of roles, and I'd be more than willing to share it with you. So thanks.